afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If we could take our seats now, we're going to get started. As you're all kind of finding your ways to your seat, it's a good opportunity for me to just go over a few short housekeeping notes. In front of you, you'll see some evaluation forms. This is an opportunity for you to give us feedback on the conference. If you're sticking around tomorrow, which we hope you are, because there's every reason to, we have a fantastic program tomorrow all throughout the day. But if you're staying through tomorrow, fill them out before the end, before you leave, and give them to us. There will be a prize draw at the end of the conference to give away the evaluation form that we choose. But if you are leaving early for whatever reason, please try to fill in the form prior to leaving. You could either leave it on the table or hand it to a member of our staff, and we'll consider it. It's perhaps particularly important for us to hear your point of view this year, since we made the decision for the first time to move the conference location, at least for the off year that we're not in Shanghai, here to Chengdu, which we think was a great move, but we want to hear your feedback on it, of course, to help inform. Obviously, it also helps us to develop the program and our events surrounding it, so really do take the time. I know Chris Rao from CFLP told me he really doesn't like my beard, so if you're really against the beard as well, you can put that down. Maybe I'll even consider shaving it in time for next year. A couple of other things. We've had a few headsets. Sorry, at the end of the day, can you please make sure that you return your translation headsets to the desk where you picked them up, just outside the conference room here. They're not going to help you during to translate anything during the gala dinner, I'm afraid. So we'd like to have them back so we can recharge them overnight. So please return them then. After this session at 5:30, we're going to move on to our wonderful gala dinner tonight, which is in the hotel on the 27th floor at the Flair Bar. You simply take the lifts back up to the main lobby on the 25th floor, which is just around the corner here, that way. And then there's another lift that takes you up the other two floors. So we've got some lovely drinks out on the terrace with views over Chengdu, and we'll have some live cooking stations for a very, very nice evening. So please do join us for that. Okay, I hope you've all enjoyed the conference so far. We've been on quite a journey already as it is. We started in the morning, getting a lot of macroeconomic views and economic developments about China, about the continued growth, but also about the way the economy continues to reform on the supply side, and perhaps some reforms needed as well in the auto financing and secondhand cars, and the impacts that we're seeing in the market. We've heard quite a bit about the New Silk Road, the One Belt, One Road policy, including the amazing ambitions actually for Chengdu to move something like 3,000 trains per year between Chengdu and Europe by 2020. And of course, many other services that we're starting to see at least trialed, if not used more regularly, to other locations, be it Chongqing or elsewhere in China, connecting Europe. So obviously a great symbol of being here in Chengdu and discussing all of those. We also heard about growing multimodal transport in the last session with things like short sea. And we started to talk more about automation and developments of technology and what that's going to mean, or what that does mean for automotive logistics in China now and in the future. And that's what, of course, we're coming on to in our session this afternoon, China Manufacturing 4.0. By now, you'll have figured out that the China Manufacturing 4.0 is referring to Industry 4.0, which Mr. Xu from SGM gave a really great summary of, and which we'll hear a bit more detail from our other presenters in talking about the move towards a more connected world of supply chain management, logistics, and production, be it through the Internet of Things, big data, advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, autonomous driving, and what that connection will mean and will change to the way that we work in logistics. As you also heard, Industry 4.0 has its direct counterparts in China. Made in China 2025. In fact, last year, when Prime Minister Li Keqiang was in Germany, there's some joint announcements about investments that would be made by both Germany and China to sort of increase cooperation and technology in the Industry 4.0 space. And of course, the many important German manufacturers in China will no doubt be investing in a lot of this technology. But as we'll hear a bit more this session, perhaps there are some differences in the China context to what we see in Germany or the US, perhaps with more emphasis on increasing research and development, increasing broadband and IT services and connections, as well as some environmentally friendly aspects as well. What's interesting, of course, for logistics is the technology that we're already starting to see trialed and emerged. Again, you'll hear more examples this session, and you heard some earlier, whether it's connected bins and packaging that can automatically read or replenish material, or wearable devices that can help with picking and sorting parts, or AGVs, drones perhaps to monitor high rack inventory or vehicle yards, and of course autonomous driving. So what that could mean when we really connect that all together, we could be working in a very different space over the next 10 years. And of course, that's just as relevant here in China as it is in Germany and the US. So we've got a panel of sort of experts, practitioners, academics on stage to talk about some of these ideas with you today. Take a moment to introduce our panel. Very pleased to be joined by Rui Zhu, Director of Supply Chain for Chery, Jaguar Land Rover, which of course opened one of the most newest and modern factories in China at the end of last year or beginning of last year. And we'll get to hear some examples of what Industry 4.0 means for CJLR today and perhaps in the future. Also pleased to be joined by Steve Dyer, a partner at Bain, of course an important consultancy, and Steve will be able to talk us through some more of the concepts and applications of Made in China 2025 and Industry 4.0. And joining us as a panelist is Professor Zhang Zhuadong, Vice Dean of Beijing Jiaotong University, who is quite an expert on many things concerning transport and logistics, and will be able to give us some views about what the developments are in China. So as usual format, we'll have presentations first, and then we'll move to Q&A. So, Rui?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Richard from Chery, Jaguar Land Rover. And in the past 2 years, my old friend Luis always invited me to speak at his conference. I declined. I'm sorry for that, but I was busy for a new and a big project. I want to keep it as a secret. Last year, we put our product into market, and we won profit immediately, which created a miracle again in China automotive industry. So I'm pleased to stand here and unveil our project and share our discoveries together. In order to facilitate your understanding, I will come back to Mandarin. 这里就是占地1平方公里的一个常识项目。
Well, this is a Chengdu project with an investment of 10.9 billion RMB yuan, covering 1 square kilometers of area. It has 4 centers, including quality centers, inspection centers, and manufacturing centers, so on and so forth. In the past 3 years, the construction of the site attracted a lot of attention. My old friend Louis sent some experts to pay 2 visits to this manufacturing site. As the newest combustion vehicle OEM, probably the last project to be approved by NSRD, it probably represents the highest manufacturing capabilities and capacities in China. Before I launched this project, we made a lot of study tour to other manufacturing sites. We were well received, so I would like to offer our gratitude to our colleagues. I got this feeling that the stakeholders in the automobile industries are willing to share the experience with each other to promote the development of the automobile industry in China together. So in this industry 4.0, what can we do? Well, in China, we can see that there are stages of development of automobile industry. The automobile industry started from handwork, single workshop to mass production, represented by Ford. And then Toyota revolutionized the manufacturing system for the manufacturing of automobile, and especially the pulling system. And then Mercedes-Benz as well as BMW provide individualized, customized production and manufacturing. So what are some of the features of the Industry 4.0? Automation, information, informatization, and intelligence. When we visit other OEM or manufacturing sites, we realized the automation level was pretty high. Without any hesitation, we choose the AGV. Well, let's say if we work 3 shifts a day, we need at least 3 workers a day. But for AGV, it works 24 hours a day without interruption. We don't have to change shift. For international AGV manufacturers, they sell AGV at a very expensive way.
Second, AGV is only a vehicle or medium through which we can do the transshipment or transportation, but the core technology is the so-called scanned online, or SPS plus PTL. What does that mean? In the past, due to different individualistic requests from different orders, so we have to make it as a sequential order before we can divide the whole big production line into some smaller ones. So each smaller line has to convert the original material document or bill into some sequential systems. And I have made some visits to some corporates. Not all the companies have embraced this type of model. So they are still working on manual labor because they have their own reason, because they can achieve a really high growth rate pattern, and also the ROI is quite good. So there's no correct or wrong answer. But for us, actually, we are working in the premium car sector. We are actually a firm believer of our own model. Ever since 2 decades ago, on the rack, we used a Noren card, or those paper cards, but now these paper cards have been paperless or have been shifted to e-copies or e-cards. And also we have the auto calls. In case of any unexpected happenings on site, the workers will press the button and the forklift driver will see the screen, and also they will understand as to which workstation has the problem and which station needs the help. This has been in really extensive application in China now. For some big components and spare parts, we have the conveyor system using different type of mechanical systems. This is RFID scanning, which you are all familiar with for both in and out purposes. This is the returnable cleaning. In the past, it's purely based upon manual labor, and now we have the machine doing the cleaning. But now, for the washings, it is purely based upon the imported machines. So for the domestic players, they have a large potential to tap. Here, this is a busy slide combining all the lessons learned and all the key experiences we have accumulated over the past few years, including the feed line arrays using the E-frames and the line racking, the special packages, and so on and so forth. So this is not based upon our own experience, but it's a crystallization of many experiences of other companies. For example, we make reference to the BMW way to do the feed line way. And also for the engine offline AGV, this actually attach credit to SGMW and SGM. And also for converting packing plant, we have seen it applied in FAW-VW Chengdu plant. And this is the shop floor management. You can see everything is in apple pie order, very clean. And this hopefully can represent the utmost or the highest level of efficiency and precision. Apart from learning from other companies, our company is a growing company, so we have our own way of innovation. So here I want to share with you some of our own industrial revelations and innovations. Every year, we attend the year competition for the industrial innovations in this car automotive and logistics sector. So we have the following few innovations. We serve 225 dealerships or first dealerships. Some are close, some are far away from each other. So we selected some of the heavy volume or heavy order first dealerships. To be more specific, the number is totally 7. So we have a specific order. So for these 7 first dealerships that are remotest to the main station, 7 days will be the maximum for the transportation. And for those which is half the distance, 4 days will be the maximum. But how to ensure 7 days and 4 days for different first dealerships at different distances from the main factory? So we have the following few measures. For example, the outbound tracking systems, doing the maneuvering and also the checking of the vehicles on road for the unloading and uploading purposes. And also we have the controlling towers controlling almost everything, including the checking and also the exchanges, offloading on the ship. So what are the functions or what are the key highlights? So we all know about GPS. No matter where you go, no matter which place the car is ushered to, so the geographical location will be portrayed and displayed automatically on the screen. So here you can see the license number, the mobile phone number of the driver, the positioning time, the departing time, the destination place, the speed at which it's moving, and many other parameters. So human-machine interface of interaction becomes a key feature. And also for on-site and on-time monitoring, it includes many important data and figures, including the on-road, on-time display of GPS information, license number, and contact information, monitoring tracks, trajectory keeping, overspeed warning, the breakdown time monitoring, and abnormal treatment and historical storage of data. And each time, if you have an emergency on road, you have to call the first dealership for help, just as we do on the Taobao or Tmall. We have automatic checking systems which can automatically display the information of the cargo en route. You don't have to check and even call the back-end office for the information. Also, we have also taken into consideration the milk runs. For example, we have around 36 suppliers at different distances from the factory. For the inbound logistics, we use also this control tower to project the real-time information on the screen for everybody to see. On each car, there is a GPS system checking each location of the car. So the red part represents delay or postponement of the delivery, and we will have some A plan or B plan on site at its disposal. This is also our innovation. Here I have listed a traditional example, receiving window of Toyota cars. This is the receiving window of Toyota. So it tells you that all the suppliers have the regular time for the on-site delivery of the products. And also they have a very clear description and description of the job allocation and assignment for each and every responsible person. But the shortcoming is also quite obvious. It takes too much time for the documentation and archiving. For me, actually, I travel a lot, so my personal feeling is that the time I got to the airport, the information board will instantly tell me as to which way to go and what is a flight number, whether it is on schedule or not. So that is something enlightening to me. Whether we can also use this pattern and this method for our logistics sector. So for the products, we have incoming 10 docks and outgoing 10 docks. So when the products come to this dock, at the very gateway, there is a screen automatically assigning the dock for the car to get in, and it will differ from from season to season and from dock to dock. The good news is that it's quite safe. The cars just come in sequentially, though you do not have to compete with each other to get in earlier than other cars. And also, the time you get in, it is also the time for you to offload. Thirdly, it can also avoid the time delay because each and every car has been assigned with its specific time of unloading and uploading. And also, it can also enhance the turnover rate and also to reduce the downtime. So also here we have seen some circles highlighting the manufacturing excellences. I have those ideas, and I'm very happy and proud that my team members have put all these ideas into practices. With the growth of the China's auto sector, including the new energy sector and also the automatic driving industry and technologies, there will be more innovations in the future. I'm looking forward to sharing more innovations with all of you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rui. I think,
谢谢朱先生。这个报告的信息量非常的大。包括这个入库、出库的跟踪监测，以及我们的物料的储存、堆放以及创新等等。那么我们也非常看到你们吸取了很多其他的公司的。
To find the best solutions there. Obviously, that's a big part of the reason why we run a conference like this and put you all in one room. So I think that's all very encouraging, and I'm sure there's a lot more to share as the years go by. Next up, I'd like to invite Steve Dyer from Bain.
Thank you. 各位先生、女士，大家下午好。
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Stephen Dyer from Bain Company. I'm the partner of this company, so it is my great pleasure to share with you about my insight into Industry 4.0 and its impact on automotive manufacturing. So I prepare an English version of my slide, so just like Mr. Zhu, I want to say only a few Chinese at the very beginning before I shift to English, which I feel more comfortable with.
Just as a brief introduction, Bain & Company, the firm that I'm with, is a global management consulting firm, and we work across all industries, but I particularly work in automotive industry and have worked both in doing strategy, but also operations, including product development and research and development, as well as manufacturing, procurement, and supply chain and logistics. So it's my pleasure to be here with you today. We all have been witness to the incredible economic miracle that's happened in China over the last 30, almost 40 years now, since reform and opening. The Chinese economy has grown astoundingly quickly and now represents from a base of very small to now being the second largest economy in the world, next to the US, and with a path in the next decade or a few decades of becoming the largest economy in the world. It's a miracle because over the last 30 to 40 years, more people have been taken out of poverty than at any time in the history of the earth. It's quite miraculous, quite astounding. Now, during that time, the economic GDP has continued to increase, as has productivity per worker. Now, as you see from the data here, unfortunately, China still stands at a very low productivity level, almost 10 times less than the US, and even significantly less than other developed economies. And we expect that although a productivity increase year by year of 7 or 8% is very high, we expect this growth to slow down over the coming decade. So frankly, it will be a long time before China is able to catch up to some of the leading global economies in terms of productivity. And that's where China Manufacturing 2025 or Industry 4.0 may play a role. So as the growth in China has slowed, the government has clearly stated their intention to support what we call digitalization of the economy, and particularly digitalization of industrial economy. And this is seen as the path to continue or to leap or jumpstart the productivity growth that's happened over the last few years and make up for the increasing labor costs in China. So the Chinese government, as you probably are already familiar with, has established a program called China Manufacturing 2025, and the intent is to take the industry in China from being the world's factory to being something more innovative, to move it up the value chain, to make it more value added. And with that in mind, the government's established several strategic priorities and also some key sectors that they want to support investment and development in. And some of those key sectors are very relevant for all of us here because they include, of course, the internet and the Internet of Things. They include CNC machines and robotics, and they also include new energy vehicles. So very relevant. We also heard earlier today about advanced shipping, and that's one of the sectors that the government is supporting as well in this program. So the specific goals, it's interesting, we're talking about Industry 4.0, but in fact, many of the goals of the government for China Manufacturing 2025 are more like Industry 3.0 or Industry 3.5. But it's actually quite broad. It's much broader than just manufacturing. It includes a lot of innovation and research and development metrics. It includes what you would expect, quality and value-added ratio, as well as improved productivity. But it also includes some Industry 3.0 things like increased automation or CNC machines, increased use of virtual testing. Back when I was an engineer 25 or so years ago, I was already using a lot of virtual testing. So that's not new, but the government is encouraging companies to take advantage of these relatively mature technologies. The other interesting thing about China Manufacturing 2025 is the green focus. So clearly this is top of the agenda for the Chinese government and for many companies to reduce use of water, of fuel and energy, reduce emissions, as well as increase the use of recycled waste. So China's manufacturing program, you could say, is somewhat similar to those of Germany and the US. Now, each one takes a slightly different approach. The US has a well-established base of innovation, and so the focus for the US government's support there is to create bottom-up innovation by encouraging investment in these technologies. Germany takes a little more of a top-down approach by saying we want to develop the smart factory and have a clear roadmap of the different technologies that will take us there. China's approach is to, again, take advantage of its current strong industries. And one of those industries, besides manufacturing, is the internet. There are 3 well-known internet giants in China now, and internet competency and capabilities is quite high. So the focus of the Chinese Manufacturing 2025 is to somehow integrate and combine the internet and manufacturing. So our firm Bain and Company has studied this trend of digitalization in depth, and we've identified 8 different topic areas or trends that will impact all industries, but I'd like to particularly highlight 3 of them that I believe are most relevant for us in the automotive industry. The first one is the Internet of Things. And we've had many speakers talk about this, so I know you're very familiar with this. But just this morning, I was using the Internet of Things because my wife bought me a weighing scale to weigh my body weight each morning. And unfortunately, after I weigh myself, it uploads the data to my mobile phone, and I'm forced to look at it and understand that I still have a long way to go to achieve my goal of losing weight. So we're all very familiar with this, and this is very relevant also for manufacturing. Big data is essentially using the data that comes out of the sensors and the wireless connections of the Internet of Things to do data mining and to identify trends and opportunities for improvement, as well as after the fact to look back at things and to do root cause analysis in the automotive industry for customer service warranty. Advanced robotics is another trend that we see up here that is clearly relevant for the automotive industry. Now, robots have been used in the automotive industry, I don't know how long, probably at least 50 years, maybe longer. So robots are not new. But what you'll see in a minute is the penetration of robots, especially in China, still has a long way to go. So there are more opportunities to automate using robots. And now with the Internet of Things and big data, there are opportunities to combine sensors, remote sensors and wireless communication to use robots in a different way, a more intelligent way. And that's a big trend. And I'll talk a little bit about some examples of companies that are doing this now. So the Internet of Things, big data, robots, et cetera, all of these trends, they will have impact across every aspect of the automotive industry, not just production or logistics, but in fact, new products and services. We heard a little bit about the integration of connectivity in the vehicles, cars themselves, as well as new ways of engaging with customers through various mobile apps and intelligent systems. But certainly what we're here to talk about today is more the operational focus things. So R&D, we talked a little bit about virtual reality, about virtual testing, about 3D printing potentially for prototypes in the automotive industry, as well as virtual reality. I don't know if any of you have tried the most recent offerings from HTC, the Vive virtual reality system, or Oculus Rift. These have big implications for visualizing things in the product development as well as the customer engagement spaces. Production and supply chain, clearly there are opportunities for these things to have an impact, and that's what we'll talk about in the next few minutes. So as a firm, Bain & Company, we've analyzed sort of the path toward Industry 4.0 or toward digitalization in each of these areas, and we've mapped out sort of the steps that we foresee happening. Now, obviously, no one knows exactly how this will evolve, but we see a few milestones along the road. And so I'd like to talk about, in particular, 3 of these related to production, logistics, and inventory management. So first, related to production. It's interesting that the Internet of Things, big data now, is potentially impacting all areas of production. So here's an example from Toyota. Now, when I think of Toyota, frankly, I don't think of them as being a lead user of technology. Typically, they tend to go with more mature, established technology. But in fact, they're using a lot of these digitalization and Industry 4.0 things, including smart devices that employees wear, including sensors on the raw materials in the bins, including sensors on the machines that communicate with each other, as well as in the environment. So if humidity is too high, they may not go into the paint booth for a given vehicle. They may route it a different way. So they're utilizing all of these things. Now, one of the key elements of automation for the auto industry is robotics. Now, in 2013, China became the largest market for purchase for demand of robotics. But you can see from the right-hand graph that the penetration of robots in Chinese industry is still quite low. Again, almost 10 times less than the more mature markets. And certainly in the auto industry, penetration of robots both in China and elsewhere is much higher than other industries, but China still has a way to go. Tesla and their new plant, especially their second production line, is a role model for what the future of the automotive industry might look like. Instead of the 200 to 300 robots in their complete plant, they have about 540 something robots. So they're using robots not only in the traditional areas of body in white and welding, as well as painting, but they're using them also for adaptive conveyance between elements of the production line, as well as in vehicle assembly. So assembling seats, assembling instrument panels, assembling sunroofs, and things that in many other factories are done manually or only semi-automatically. There are also intelligent tools being used now. So one example is a nut running tool that not only has sensors for torque, but also the angles, as well as wireless communication to display that data after each nut or bolt has been tightened, to detect any quality problems, and also detect trends for the tool to see if it's going, the battery's going down or there's some problem with the tool, as well as to be saved data to be used later for customer services purposes. If there's a warranty spill, the nut running data can be checked to see whether or not for a specific vehicle and a specific bolt, the torque was correctly applied. So that's another example. Wireless communication, especially using RFID, is now becoming much more sophisticated so that you can have wireless RFID on the bin for parts that are being assembled. They can communicate directly with a robot that will choose the appropriate program to assemble that, as well as display information to the worker working there and monitor the worker's motions, either via laser sensors or some other wearable device. So these are becoming even more sophisticated and more mature. We heard a little bit already about using new digitalization technology in logistics. Certainly, companies are now using intelligent systems to both track the location of their vehicles, but also the status of the vehicles and the driver even, as well as the cargo for temperature, for acceleration or damage, jerking motions. So the result of these improvements have actually led directly to the bottom line. So fuel consumption reduced by 10% in some cases, and the on-time rate increased significantly. In warehouse and inventory management, there are these things called iBins that also utilize RFID technology to monitor in real time when parts are taken out of the bins and eliminate any manual entry, which of course saves cost and time and also saves errors. So the inventory can be updated in real time, and therefore this has also for some companies resulted in actual lower inventory because they don't have to carry as much safety stock. So just to summarize, there are a lot of trends going on. There are a lot of opportunities, a lot of technology applications that may have relevance for your company and many companies. Some of our clients are a little overwhelmed with all of this. They don't know where to start. They don't know whether they should look at things from a system-wide perspective and do a top-down plan, or they should just allow the different applications to be applied in individual machines or individual plants. And so we found that one thing that's helpful is for our clients to go through the process of prioritizing which of these Industry 4.0 technologies or approaches they should work on first. So one way to think about that would be to think of what of the applications or the technologies are quite urgent, meaning that the industry trend is clear, all of our competitors are using it, or it would allow us to provide better service to our customers if we use that. So that would gauge the urgency of each technology or application. On the other axis, the vertical axis here, is essentially the return on investment. So what is the benefit, what is the investment, and what are the risks And then we can sort of categorize things in 4 different boxes of priority, with the highest priority being the things that are most urgent and have the highest potential return on investment and benefit, and the lower priority things being things that are less urgent but provide good return, or very urgent but little return. So this is sometimes helpful, we found, for our clients to navigate through this complicated landscape of many opportunities and many technologies. And so I'll leave that with you. Once again, thank you for your attention, and look forward to speaking with anyone who's interested in speaking during the question and answer session as well as after. Thank you.
Okay, xie. Thank you, Steve. I think that was, again, a great presentation, giving us a good sense of what this really kind of means in the China context and the global context for Industry 4.0, and some really fascinating examples of some of the technology that we are starting to see, and which I'm sure many in this room are or will soon perhaps consider using. Before we open this up to Q&A, we also have Professor Zhang on the panel here, and I thought perhaps we can start, Professor Zhang, with you perhaps reflecting on what Made in China 2025 and Industry 4.0 might mean specifically for logistics and transportation in China.
So shall I go there or just?
You can, whatever you prefer. Do you want to come here? Or?
Okay.
Sure.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The previous 2 speakers are formal speakers. I'm here to play a supportive role. I received an invitation from Louis to support this session. The moderator raised a question on how this Made in China 2025 and Industry 4.0 has an impact on the logistic industry. I think this session is devoted to the application of big data and Internet of Things on automobile industry and automobile logistic industry. Internet of Things is designed to collect and transmit data, and then the application on the analysis of big data is of critical importance. So we can talk about Made in China 2025 or Industry 4.0 based upon that. I'm not that optimistic as you are. Industry 1.0 and Industry 2.0, they're pretty clear. The definition is clear. They have very clear-cut effect. But as to Industry 3.0, we're not pretty sure about what it is. But as to Industry 4.0, it's all about intelligence and digitalization. I'm not sure what kind of impact it will bring about to our industries in the future. I would like to provide 2 points for consideration. There are different kinds of technological breakthroughs. The applications are quite complicated. We've got such a massive landscape of technologies. Probably some technologies will be substituted by new technologies in a very short period of time. So the whole landscape looks pretty messy to me. We use new technologies for 2 reasons. First of all, it brings down the cost of the company. Secondly, effectively improve the quality of the products and services. We've got many routes toward that target. Why should we upgrade from Industry 3.0 to Industry 4.0? So we have to take into consideration another question, that is whether the application of new technologies will give rise to a new industry. When the combustion engine came into existence, it revolutionized the whole industry and it created a new industry. So we're thinking about whether new technologies can create new industries in the future. Automobile industry is a heavy user of many new technologies. We need to enhance the customer experience, so we have to install the technologies from other industries to the auto industries. Well, let's say audio industry, audio technologies or video technologies. They don't belong to the automobile industries in the past, but in order to enhance the customer experience, we just transplant these technologies to the automobile industry. So there might be a kind of technology which will integrate all the technologies into the production process of the automobile. But this is Industry 3.0. This is not Industry 4.0. In Industry 4.0, we're trying to understand the relevance between the automobile industries and the technologies in other industries, which means we have to take a look at the interface. We don't have to install the CD player, DVD player, or other devices onto the vehicle. We just need a communication portal on board the vehicle. So probably, instead of putting everything on the vehicle, we just need to connect the vehicles to everything else outside the car. So to the traditional auto industries, we need to revolutionize our mentality in design and production. So in the past, it is only the design department that takes care of the customer's experience. But right now, we can have direct access to the customer's point of view at the very early stage of the design of the new model. Secondly, we need to introduce new changes to the manufacturing process of the vehicles. Industry 2.0 equals to mass production or assembly line, but Industry 4.0, will it be applied to automobile industry or ICT industry? That remains a question. The production technologies and process needs to be revolutionized in Industry 4.0. Our previous two speakers talked a lot about technological breakthroughs and innovation on model innovations in automobile industry, which will have a direct impact upon the logistic industry. There might be some changes to the assembly line. There might be some changes to the space layout of the assembly line. The nitty-gritty technological changes will not bring the automobile industry to Industry 4.0. Probably the 3D printing will totally revolutionize the automobile industry. Do we still need a physical space for manufacturing? If we change the manufacturing side, probably we're going to change the entire distribution network. The supply chain will inevitably be affected in Industry 4.0. If we change the manufacturing process, we definitely will have to introduce changes to the logistic and value chain, the material flow, the information flow. Everything will be changed. The supply network and production network, as well as the distribution networks, their relationship will be changed. Well, this morning, a guest from Chengdu talked about the railway networks that connects Chengdu to European countries. Probably we need to take a look at the geographical redistribution of the production site, the inventory, and other logistic facilities. For the manufacturing facilities, sometimes they outsource the logistic services. Because of the new geographical distribution of manufacturing facilities, one single logistics service suppliers cannot do the whole job. Multimodal transportation is a very good example. In the next 2 to 3 years, probably there might be some breakthroughs in the multimodal transportation. We need more collaboration across different stakeholders. And thirdly, probably we need a new institution. The industry upgrade from 3.0 and 4.0, the local government as well as the senior management of a company would have to think about something of a greater importance, for example, how to design new institutions and systems. There must be a shift of mentality in the understanding of the reduction of cost. I think the foreign companies are doing better than the Chinese companies, but the joint venture is no superior to the domestic company in China.
The core value is to reduce the cost even further. For example, this year 50,000, and next year another 20,000 was cut, but it is not applied for the industrial chain, so the benefit is not evenly felt. It's still something quite pitiful. Secondly, in the whole supply side of the supply chain, I think you can feel strongly the changes of the railway industry. This morning, Mr. Chen has mentioned about Rongou or Chengdu Europe Express Line is also a typical case in point. So this is also a general impression that we are moving towards international integration. So due to time limit, I won't go into much detail. Tomorrow we will have some other sessions to have a discussion of this later. Secondly, for the logistics hardware or the machineries, it will be much more standard and much more up to the international practice. So when the hardware is highly standardized, it will force us to be moving closer to industrialization version 4.0. Last but not least, I want to say that under the big philosophy, the Chinese government is coming up with some orientations of the policies and measures. I want to give you a couple of examples. Last August, the 3 ministries of China have been issuing a document for setting up a so-called logistic park for demo purposes. Secondly, whether the local governments have been giving full play to the market force is another very important factor. That's why since Q4 of last year, the Ministry of Commerce has issued a document. The key essence is really to give full play to this spirit. Thirdly, I've been just finished an evaluation assessment process of the multimodal way of development in the future. I've seen some of the application documents by some of the companies sitting here, but not all the companies. Actually, it's the small companies that have been writing about the multimodal way of transportation, but the big companies didn't mention about that. So this is a pity. But due to the time limit, I will have to stop here. Thank you.
Zhang, for that again another interesting analysis of Industry 4.0, probably showing us that things aren't perhaps so clear as yet, and many things to still kind of be determined in terms of how the market and government react here to Industry 4.0. We've got some time for questions now, so as usual we'll have microphones going around. So if you can say your question in English or Chinese, we'll translate it. Does anybody want to start us off? We have a question right here from the young lady. Right up front, that second one.
我是那个物流
I come from Logistics Application Journal. I'm a correspondent. I have two questions for Mr. Zhu. Please comment on intelligent storage or smart logistics as its impact on the future of the automotive industry. Secondly, based upon your experience, as have seen that you have talked a lot about the inventory building, what are some of the experiences and the key lessons you can draw from this practice? Thank you. So these are the two questions I want to raise. Okay, thank you for your question. First of all, I think it is a very good question because with the car penetration rate getting even higher, I think that the automatic or the smart or the intelligent way of storage becomes not only an auto issue but also a social issue. For example, how to solve the problem of parking in the central part of the city is a big problem. So some industrial leaders have made a lot of researches into this area. More solutions will be coming out pretty soon. Secondly, this forum, I think it's a good platform for us to discuss these issues with each other. So just now, Mr. Zhang has already given you some key highlights. I want to also offer my own comments. I fully agree with what Professor Zhang has mentioned about the current comment on the industrialization version 4.0. So far, consensus is yet to reach. Secondly, as contrast to the version 3.0, the current logistics management system has undergone some great changes. For example, while we are selecting the suppliers, we have to see whether they have the AGV capability or PTL capability. So everybody has to be aware of the changes, otherwise we can't cope with the challenge. Secondly, this discussion is quite rewarding because in this revolution, what type of opportunities can we draw? I gave an example just now. Based upon these changes, for AGV suppliers or the vendors, of course, it is an opportunity. And for PTL vendor, of course, it is an opportunity. And for those consultation companies, of course, it's an opportunity for them to go international. For Jaguar and Rover, they are building different factories around the world. But so far, no consultation companies can help JLR to do this issue from the PTL or AGV perspective. So I think we can really easily draw our own conclusion as to what type of benefits we can really get from this pattern. Secondly, for Nokia, for Samsung, they are all both leaders in the mobile phone industry. For example, text messaging, sending calls, having bigger screens. Yes, indeed. But for Apple, what has Apple done? Apple's success lies in the fact that they can give you a feeling that you are really a trendy person by combining all the best from Samsung or Nokia. So actually, these are the opportunities lost or forgotten by the previous few leaders. So I fully agree with the previous few comments. For auto logistics sector, more innovation will be needed. And just now, you also mentioned about the smart storage. Also, I'm very optimistic about its future. Thank you.
There. Any other questions from the floor? Perhaps following on from that a little bit from my side, you presented quite a few interesting pieces of technology. When we spoke last year, I think you talked about doing just-in-line sequence, which was something new, certainly in China. So how have your vendors and logistics providers sort of responded to some of these changes, whether it's new technology or processes here? Have they been able to meet your requirements well enough? Has it required additional training or consulting with your supply base as well? Or with your logistics partners, I mean to say.
Sorry, are you asking me?
I was, but...
too many questions.
Sorry, okay. I'll repeat the question. I was just following up on that point a little bit because you mentioned some new technology, obviously, in your presentation, so on the factory floor. And when we spoke last year, we also spoke about some new processes, like just-in-line sequence and some new dollies and AGVs and as such. And I was wondering how your logistics partners have also responded to some of these new processes and technology that you've been using, and has that required any additional training or capabilities amongst your providers and partners?
Okay. Say I can give two examples. One is that when we just do the planning to set up this new business, and we invited our service providers, our partners to join us. We visit different OEMs and learn their advantages so that we can develop our strategies together. And until today, we are stable and we deliver good performance. And I would say without their support, we cannot come to this far. So I say that is good. The other example is that, okay, say because we have so many different features from the customers, and we change all the electronic parts into kitting. And say one of our supplier is also the sponsor here, CDC. He has no experience of a KSK operation, and we also trained it, and it learned, and finally it growth, and say launched this KSK project very successfully. And in the beginning, many management worried about that. Even the CEO of Jaguar is a project leader because they suffer a lot from the supply from Morocco suppliers, whatever. But we prove that we can do much better and beyond their expectation. So I would say right now we have a few key service providers. Right now, our cooperation is very stable, and they also learn from our patients, they grow, and they are competent to do more business. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor? Another question from my side, this time for Steve. You showed that sort of chart at the end of your presentation, the sort of high priority, low priority, high return, low return. I know it certainly must vary very much from company to company, but if you were sort of doing an assessment for, say, automotive logistics and material handling in plants and stuff, what might you identify as the more kind of urgent, or what would be kind of your first focus for some car makers or tier suppliers to maybe think about investing in?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Of the 8 trends that I presented at the beginning, I focused on 3 of them, and I believe those 3 are the most relevant and the highest priority for many companies in the automotive industry, including OEMs and suppliers and logistics providers. And that's applications related to Internet of Things, it's big data applications, and it's intelligent and smart robots. So typically, we do this work across all industries, but for the auto industry, those 3 would go up in the upper right-hand corner of being both urgent and providing value to customers, as well as being very good returns on investment. And as you think about entering into some of these different application areas or technology, one of the challenges that many companies face is that they are now, the boundaries of the industry that we've traditionally been in are broadening. So now we have OEMs having partnerships with Alibaba or Tencent. And Alibaba and Tencent are not automotive companies. So it requires a different thinking and a different way of going about finding and developing these partnerships. But I would say for both logistics providers, for parts suppliers, you not only need to be responsive to the needs of your downstream customers, but you also need to proactively go out and seek out these potential partnerships so that you're bringing new applications and new technology and as Mr. Zhang, Professor Zhang mentioned, things that will save them money and increase their quality and improve their delivery time. They have to be very clear return on investments. But that requires going outside the normal boundaries of your industry and talking to people that you wouldn't normally talk to and be proactive about that.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the floor? You're starting to think about the cocktail hour, I see, but we're gonna hold you a bit longer, I'm afraid. Professor Zhang, you mentioned towards the end of your opening remarks the need for sort of market forces to play more a role in China, and I wondered, looking at the automotive industry, we see logistics subsidiaries of manufacturers, for example. And do you think that the fact that there's so many logistics subsidiaries of manufacturers sort of helps or hinders the possible investments in new technology? Perhaps it's not as open a market as in other parts of the world. So just, do you think that market forces, that there's more role for market forces to be played in the industry?
Well, the answer is a definite yes. For the logistics companies, indeed, for the technological application, we are indeed slower than other countries. But don't forget, China is a big and huge market. The integrative power is on the increase. And I think that the rippling effect of its integration will not be confined only to China, but will it send its impact across the board to other countries and regions. I know that many Chinese companies are making investment, setting plants in other parts of the world, like joint venture airports or docks or terminals or whatever. So these are very trendy signs that we should be proud of and should be well encouraged. So the global demand is on the increase. Secondly, with more China's companies going international, the market is going more and more standard. The reverse is also true. We have also an increasing demand for forcing the Chinese companies to embrace more market-based practices to harness the market forces to ensure more innovation based upon cost saving, especially during the 13th five-year plan. Thank you.
You had some interesting slides, I thought, early on about the productivity comparisons. So the US has the benchmark and China just roughly 10% of that level of productivity. I know that's kind of across the whole economy, and within the automotive industry as kind of the subset. Is that productivity gap as big, or does that close? Because I can probably hear some Germans shrieking when they saw that the French are more productive than them. So I wondered if there would be some differences when we look at the automotive industry specifically.
The auto industry has a little bit of a different development history in China because of the requirement for joint ventures for foreign brands. So the auto industry, I would say, in terms of both productivity as well as robot penetration, is much higher in China than other industries in China are compared with mature markets. So there's definitely a little head start for the auto industry. We do see, as we go to joint venture plants versus Chinese brand plants, that gap is still quite large. So there's still some room for Chinese automakers to approach global levels. But in general, the auto industry, including Chinese automakers, have much higher productivity and much higher robot penetration compared with other industries in China.
Yeah,
in fact, some of the plants that are here in China for joint ventures are actually more automated than plants in the foreign partner's home country. So it's quite advanced in terms of auto assembly.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question in the second row here. Mic coming to your side.
Bill Pellick from CTM. Stephen, I heard you mention earlier briefly 3D printing, and Dr. Zhang also mentioned 3D printing. And my question to you is, well, my observation, first of all, is 3D printing is actually a mind-boggling technology that I think all by itself could do some tremendous things in the industry. But what needs to happen with 3D printing for all this to take place? Because right now, all it does is fuel our imagination, but is it actually something that can be used? Where does that technology have to go before it can be commercially applied to the industry where it can actually make a paradigm shift?
Yeah, 3D printing is indeed a very attractive technology that, as Professor Zhang said, has the potential to completely turn upside down our normal manufacturing supply chain. I remember 20 years ago when I was still doing engineering work using 3D printing to create prototypes. And the prototypes were nice for visualizing things or maybe even seeing how mechanical parts would fit together, but they were completely useless in a functional way. So I think we're still far away from having a pervasive, my own personal opinion, we're still far away from having 3D printing technology that will allow truly functional parts that can be cheaper and just as high quality as parts made in traditional manufacturing. So some of the breakthroughs or the advances that I think need to happen before 3D printing will become more pervasive might have to do with metal processing. So right now, 3D printing is primarily polymers, and obviously there's more and more plastics being used in automotive and other industries, but the true engineering structural plastics, 3D printing still cannot meet the engineering specifications of traditional materials. So, and in terms of metal parts, whether it be steel or aluminum or some other alloys, the additive manufacturing is still far behind polymers. So given that many of the parts in automobiles and other consumer products are metal, that technology part of additive manufacturing needs to be advanced before it will penetrate into those industries as well. My own personal opinion.
Okay, thank you. We have time for a few more questions if there are any. Obviously, I think in China we're starting to see more focus, particularly from the government, on electrification and the push towards electric vehicles. And I wondered if that really starts to take off, if we might see how electrification of automotive and of vehicles might impact on our view of Industry 4.0 or China manufacturing 2025. Might that lead to further changes than what we've been discussing here? So maybe, Steve, if you'd like to comment on that.
Sure. Just yesterday I was meeting with a client who asked me a similar question: would the electrification of vehicles affect their core business that they were looking at acquiring? And my response was that even electric vehicles still need to be assembled. They still have wheels, they still have suspension, they still have steering, they still have interior components. So I think the core of the automotive industry will be quite similar even as vehicle electrification continues to advance. However, there will be some changes. And some companies are already starting to change the layout of vehicles to not use the same layout that we would need with an internal combustion engine in the powertrain, but rather open up new space. So that may change the way the user interfaces are available. Autonomous vehicles will be probably the bigger advance when we get to that point in terms of using Internet or Industry 4.0 technologies for connectivity and control and sensors. So in general, I think the electrification of vehicles will open up some new possibilities, but autonomous vehicles perhaps will open up more opportunities for the Industry 4.0 to have a bigger impact.
Professor Zhang, perhaps if you would like to comment on that, perhaps particularly maybe your view also of autonomous vehicles and the impacts that would have.
我跟史蒂夫的观点一样。
I think I quite agree with the previous speaker. It's because of the changes in the structure of the vehicles, it will cause the changes in the production process and also cause the changes in the supply chain. For the electric vehicles, for the development of the e-vehicles in China, on one hand, the government is pushing ahead the development of the electric vehicles. We understand that in Beijing, if you wanted to apply for a plate license for a combustion engine vehicles, you have to participate in a lottery drawing process. But if you buy electric cars, you can apply for a license plate free of charge. But the government is still, or the consumers are still concerned about the range of the electric vehicles. So that's why the local government as well as the national governments are building the charging pole. For OEM, it is not easy to make the decision. Combustion will give way to electric motor, most of the OEMs are taking both the directions or both the route. No OEM is giving up. Has given up the combustion engine route totally, because they all have concern about the range of the electric vehicles. But we're still optimistic about its future.
Another thing, looking out a little bit to the future, when we talk about Industry 4.0 or digitalization in Europe or in America, in the US, one of the debated themes is what the impact ultimately will be on employment. So I've heard figures from The Economist about job losses of 30%, or automation reaching a level that would perhaps have an even bigger impact than we've seen from previous. So does anyone from the panel want to comment on how they see this in China? Is this a purely positive thing that we need to move towards in productivity, or are there other risks involved here as well in terms of what the wider impacts might actually be? An easy question.
Okay, I'll take up the question first. Industry 4.0 means the application of a lot of intelligent technologies. But starting from this year, the central government encouraged the couples to give birth to the second child. So I think you raised a very good question. So actually, if we really want to realize Industry 4.0, we need to see the emergence of new industry. 100 years ago, we encountered similar things. In the 70s and 80s, we also encountered similar things. Yes, computer automation, they will substitute or replace some of the human laborers, but these human laborers, they'll find new jobs in new industry. And the automation technologies also requires the interference of human being. The Industry 4.0, they replace the laborers in traditional industry, but they will create more jobs in the new industries. I have some additional remarks to make. I quite agree with what other discussants have said. In each and every revolution, there might come up with some new opportunities. Well, let's say once we had cars, it doesn't mean that bicycles will be obsolete totally. Well, once we have the new energy cars, yes, the gas stations will be affected, but the charging pole industries will be flourishing. So if one door is closed, another window will be opened.
Just to add to my colleagues here, each time there have been productivity improvements, regardless of which country they're in, it's caused change. And change is often painful. And the change doesn't mean that we won't need people anymore. The change means that people will need to do different things. And that requires sometimes losing jobs and being trained in a different area. It requires changes in the education system to address the needs of the 21st century. So I expect that the same thing will happen in China as productivity increases. The needs for what type of people are required in which industries will change, and there will be some pain associated with that. But I think that will be a continuous process for the next 200 years, perhaps.
Okay, well then we'll meet you in Automotive Logistics 2316 to discuss what those impacts were. Any final maybe points or questions from the audience before we end? Okay, well, I think then that's a good place to leave it, looking way out into the future. We have a lot of change, but our panel is broadly optimistic, and so I think that's a good thing to raise a glass over, at least this evening. So I want to thank our panelists for their presentations and discussion. We can now move on to the gala dinner. Just a reminder again. Well, first of all, please, your translation headsets, please do return them to the booth on your way out. The evaluation forms, like I mentioned, make time to fill them out by tomorrow if you're leaving, or if you're leaving sooner than that, please do fill them out and hand them in to us. We really value your feedback. The gala dinner, you have to go back to the main lobby on the 25th floor, and from there, there's another lift taking you to the Flair Bar on the 27th floor. There's plenty of signs out there. We look forward to seeing you all there this evening. Thank you.